Tonight's the night. And it's going to happen again and again. Has to happen.
In July 2004, 3.5 months after the birth of yours truly, something else entirely was born. Something born in blood. I am, of course, talking about the Jeff Lindsay novel titled Darkly Dreaming Dexter, which follows the titular serial killer Dexter Morgan, who spends his days working at Miami Metro Homicide in the forensics department. If that seems a bit counterproductive with him being a serial killer and all, it's actually the perfect cover for what he gets up to in the night. In the book, Dexter targets criminals, rapists, murderers, and other unsavory characters in the vein of Batman or Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver. Dexter has a dark side of his own, however, as he doesn't just attack these people or spontaneously kill them during injustices. Dexter stalks and follows and vets each of his victims meticulously for days or sometimes even weeks leading up to the kill. He ends their lives in the most sick, gruesome way possible by tying them up to a table completely naked. This is what sets Dexter apart from most vigilantes. 2 years after the book's publication, James Manos Jr. was set to adapt the book into a television series airing on Showtime. Shortly thereafter, Parker Lewis Can't Lose and Suddenly Susan creator Clyde Phillips joined the show's crew as showrunner. And the rest, as they say, is history. Dexter went on to have 8 seasons and 2 spin-offs, with a 3rd in development as of this writing. The show's unique take on the procedural drama, which places the killer at the forefront of the plot telling the story to us, is something that TV audiences hadn't really seen before. It's considered to be one of the best crime shows ever created. With that said, the last few seasons of Dexter definitely did not continue the quality of the first few. In this recap and retrospective series, I will try and pinpoint exactly when that change in quality occurred, as well as explore the changes in thematic structure and overall story arcs within the show. I'm sure you'll all be able to tell by the title of this video, but this video will only be covering the first season, so go ahead and sit back, relax, grab yourself a snack, and buckle in tight because it's going to be one wild ride. The show opens with a shot of the blood moon in the reflection of a puddle on the street. That otherworldly theme music that always reminded me of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory starts to play, and we get our first look at the man, the myth, and the legend, Dexter Morgan. Dexter is then seen stalking a children's choir director / pastor, Mike Donovan, outside of a performance. As Mike gets into his car, Dexter surprises him from behind, wrapping a cable around his neck and forcing him to drive to a private spot. After getting out of the car, Dexter uses this cable to drag Mike inside of a dark, desolate room.
Look.
No. Open your eyes and look at what you did!
Look or I'll cut your eyelids right off your face. It took me a long time to get these little boys clean.
Mary, full of grace, the Lord.
Stop! That never helped anybody.
It's here where Mike admits to the murder of all the boys that lie before him. Dexter admits to the fact that he also has urges, but the thing that separates him from Mike is that he would never hurt a child. In other words, Dexter has standards.
I have standards.
After tying the man down to his kill table, he takes one single drop of blood from the man's cheek before making the first cut. Assumedly the next day, Dexter introduces us, the audience, to his burden.
My name is Dexter. I don't know what made me the way I am, but whatever it was left a hollow place inside. People fake a lot of human interactions, but I feel like I fake them all, and I fake them very well, and that's my burden, I guess.
The genius thing about this monologue is that Dexter himself knows that he cannot communicate emotions or feelings the same way as others. And in the scenes we've seen him in so far, he's been nothing if not nightmarishly cold. In one of his many voiceovers, which happen quite often throughout this show because it only functions with Dexter as its sole narrator, he's also quite cold and emotionless. Yet, here in this scene, he waves to a passing by boat. This scene's purpose, as well as the rest of the episode, is to endear us to Dexter as much as humanly possible, to make him lovable and normal appearing on the outside, to get us to see that anyone could be like Dexter if they are good enough at hiding who they are. Sorry, that kind of sounded like a how-to there for a second. Did I mention that Dexter is a killer and that is wrong? This is just a disclaimer really quick. This show is too good at getting you to root for Dexter. He's like Batman if Batman was slightly more unhinged. With all seriousness, if you see me fawn over or praise Dexter a little bit too much to be considered normal, just know that this is my boo, okay? And it's all fictional. Anyways, back to the video. We then skip backward a couple of years to young Dexter talking with his foster father, Harry, while on a boat.
I found the grave, son.
That dog was a noisy little creep, Dad. He was barking all night and Mom couldn't sleep and she's very, very sick, and that lousy dog was yapping at every leaf that blew down the sidewalk.
There were a lot of bones in there, Dexter. Not just buddies.
This illustrates to us that Dexter has seemingly always had a need to hunt, to kill. This shows explanation for Dexter's dark side opts for evil is born, not made, which that could change throughout the series. Back in the present, we enter Dexter's apartment, where he opens his AC unit to reveal a box of blood slides, not unlike the one that he took from Mike. Dexter then goes on to mention his father's code.
The code of Harry, my foster father, is satisfied. And so am I.
Just so you're all caught up, the code is a set of rules that Dexter's foster father, Harry, now deceased detective at Miami Metro Homicide, came up with to help prevent Dexter from ever getting caught. He then opens a voicemail from his, quote, foul-mouthed little sister Deborah, which has her asking him to meet her down at a crime scene so that she can pick his brain about a recent case.
We found another hooker in the pool.
Another?
Chopped up in bits and pieces. That's the third one in 5 months.
Third? You mean there's a...
Serial killer. That's right.
We also learn here that Deb is working in Vice currently and wants to move to Homicide, where her father once worked. Outside, in an empty pool, Dexter is told by his contemporary Vince Masuka that
there's no blood in or on or near the body at all. It's the weirdest thing you ever saw.
No sticky, hot, messy, awful blood. No blood at all. Why hadn't I thought of that? No blood.
Detective Angel Batista theorizes that the killer got interrupted because of an incomplete cut in the woman's leg. Dexter leaves the scene and is winked at by Lieutenant Maria LaGuerta, who is giving an interview to the press about the dead woman in the pool. Dexter claims to us in a voiceover that he just cannot get this bloodless body out of his mind. As mentioned before, blood is what sets Dexter's teeth on edge. I mean, it's no coincidence that Dexter ends up as what's known as a blood spatter analyst at Miami Metro Homicide. He chose a job that would go perfectly with his ability to cover up his own bloody tracks. Not only that, but he gets really excited about blood, as evidenced by his neat little box of blood slides hidden within his AC unit. I mean, just look at how he cherishes the collection of Mike Donovan's cheek blood. Dexter is, as he describes, a neat monster, one to want everything a certain way. He's not just killing for the sake of killing. Dexter is doing this to satisfy a very specific need that he has, a need he can't fully comprehend or grasp yet. Every single detail has to go according to his modus operandi, or his MO. For those who aren't aware of what an MO is, it's a Latin term referring to a killer or criminal's mode of operating, aka their patterns of behavior. So, for example, 99% of Dexter's kills involve a tedious process where he first identifies, stalks, and then subdues his victims, before setting up a kill room complete with large plastic tarps, a display of photos of the victim's own previous victims, and a large amount of plastic wrap to keep them tied down. Later on, Dexter walks into Miami Metro and brings everybody donuts. This scene helps us understand just how lovable Dexter is to everybody in Miami Metro.
Hey, Dex.
Hey, Sue. Dan.
See you at the next bloodbath.
Never miss a party.
Not a single person is onto him, I fear. Not a single person. He is keeping that mask down. He's taken extreme precautions to make sure that he never gets caught, a key component to Harry's code. Dexter then brings a donut to Camilla, who is Miami Metro's records lady.
One of these days, you're gonna tell me.
I already told you, blood spatter doesn't take up all my time.
You should find a pretty girl.
I found you.
Before handing the final donut to Angel Batista so that he can remind us that,
Just like me. Empty inside.
we then get to know a little bit about the only person in Miami Metro who is slightly onto Dexter, Sergeant James Dokes.
Where the hell you been?
Crime scene?
The Hotel Cokehead murders. This dealer and the girl.
This is child's play. Messy work. All that blood on the walls looks like a finger painting.
You give me the fucking creeps. You know that, Dexter? Fuck you.
Okay. Is there something I can do?
Yeah, you can give me your fucking analysis on the blood spatter on these killings.
Dexter insists that this crime was one of passion, a loved one's revenge after a betrayal, perhaps. Dokes is, however, pretty forceful on the fact that it was a, quote, cokehead drug overlord murder. Okay. The show will continue to play on Dokes and Dexter's relationship going forward. Dexter is quite normal appearing on the outside, yet somehow Dokes sees right through Dexter's facade. Interesting considering Dokes himself is never one for human connection. Even Dexter questions this.
The only real question I have is why, in a building full of cops, all supposedly with a keen insight into the human soul, is Dokes the only one who gets the creeps from me?
Dexter may never win over Dokes, but what he lacks in that department, he makes up for in his ability to solve crimes. Dexter is an excellent forensics worker. He's able to recognize patterns that the average person wouldn't. In this scene, Dexter explains to a cop that the alleged cokehead killer used a knife rather than a sword.
Probably a very sharp knife. Look at the blood spatter, look at the patterns. Big pond of blood right there. The male victim was standing right here, and the killer plunged his knife into the shoulder, severing the carotid artery, and notice the long, thick, heavy drips. Now over here you have nice, clean sprays of blood, and that can only happen when you're holding something light and moving quick.
A little bit later on, we see Dexter stalking his next kill, Jamie Jaworski. He explains that Jamie killed a woman he allegedly loved, named Jane Saunders, but was able to get off due to a faulty search warrant. So Dexter the show uses the failing justice system and poor police work to sort of justify Dexter's actions, and most fans will justify it as well, because what Dexter is doing is sort of like taking out the trash. His methods, however, are very questionable. Whether or not you think murder is evil, which I'm sure we all can agree is the case, you can't help but sympathize with someone who, by all accounts, is a bit deranged, just trying to take out all of the evil in the world. Some of the people that he takes out, like Jamie and Mike, are just terrible human beings. Mike is exposed by Dexter to have touched choir boys and to have raped them and killed them. The moral dilemma of Dexter killing evil men in order to satisfy his own needs is certainly an issue that's been debated among the fandom since the show came out. Dexter's own justification of
I have standards
is the pillar of his entire argument. While his methods of catching criminals is certainly illegal and most definitely morally questionable, the outcome is somewhat justified. I mean, think to yourself, if you could just push a button and end all evil and bigotry and violence in the world, I'm sure you'd feel 100% safer and more content.
Soon you'll be packed into a few neatly wrapped hefties, and my own small corner of the world will be a neater, happier place. A better place.
Dexter is this show's attempt at that, and yeah, it's extremely questionable. But at the end of the day, what Dexter does is all fiction, so you can't necessarily look at it through a lens of reality. Later that day, Dexter breaks into Jamie's house and illegally searches for evidence that he killed Jane Saunders.
Animals don't like me, especially dogs.
Before finding a video camera and some bondage magazines. Days later, at night, Dexter makes his way to his date after monologuing about his aversion to sex.
I don't understand sex. Not that I have anything against women, and I certainly have an appropriate sensibility about men. And after years of trying to look normal, I think I met the right woman for me. She's perfect because Rita is, in her own way, as damaged as me.
Dexter then introduces us to his girlfriend Rita, who is absolutely mother. We then meet Rita's kids, Aster and Cody. Dexter explains that Rita's ex-husband repeatedly raped her, and since then she's been sexually closed off, which Dexter says, quote, works for him. Rita and Dexter go out for crab legs before Dexter sees police sirens in the distance, eventually making his way towards them and ditching his date Rita. Once Dex gets there, Angel says,
Over here, rough, almost emotional. Then over here, not so much, And then over here, clean, all bone. The killer flayed the skin, the flesh, completely off.
Dexter hypothesizes that the killer is, quote, raising the stakes with each kill. The reason that this pattern intrigues Dexter is because he also cuts his victims up in a very similar manner as this killer does. Later on, Dexter accidentally touches Rita while trying to explain the killer's MO. After returning home, Dexter investigates Jamie Jaworski on his laptop, finding out that he owns a site. Dexter then confirms that Jamie is the one. In another flashback, teenage Dexter explains to Harry that he only kills animals after Harry confronted Dexter about a bloody knife he had found. Harry then hints at a supposed tragic event in Dexter's past, something that may have influenced him at a young age to do what he does. In this scene, Harry suggests that they create a series of rules for Dexter to follow so that he can use his urges for good because, quote, some people deserve it. The next day, Deborah asks Dex what cell crystallization is because she heard the coroner talking about it. Dexter then reveals to Deb that cell crystallization means that the body must have been on ice for an extended period of time. Deborah is begging Dexter to help her figure this out because without it, she won't be able to make it onto homicide and she'll be stuck working in Vice. This is when Dexter realizes that the killer must have used a refrigerated truck to store the body in.
And you got that look in your eye.
I was there before you, and I noticed this body looked different than the other ones. Her pieces were cold. They're like meat packing cold. So is that what cell crystallization means?
My God, why didn't I think of that? It's beautiful. Cold slows the flow of blood. Refrigerated truck. He wants a cold environment to slow the flow of blood, clean and mobile so he can dump the garbage afterwards.
So I'm looking for a refrigerated truck now.
During a meeting, Deborah is humiliated by Maria, who dismisses her cell crystallization theory.
I have an idea. Something in a different direction.
Please share it with us.
Cell crystallization. On the last victim, I'd like to check and see if any refrigerated trucks have been stolen in the last week or so.
Refrigerated trucks like ice cream trucks?
Not ice cream trucks. A refrigerated vehicle that could cause that kind of tissue damage.
That's very interesting. Very creative. Let's keep looking for the witness, okay? We know that he or she is out there. The forensic evidence, the interrupted cut, proves that there was an eyewitness. But just keep talking to all your hookers. That's all for today.
After the meeting, Maria calls Dexter into her office in a flirtatious way, leading to Deb questioning if they are having an affair. Later on, while Dokes is still in the room, Dexter tries to convince Maria that the cokehead murder was not done by a drug lord and instead was done by a loved one.
The murderer came to kill the woman, not the dealer. He did him quick and got him out of the way, but he sure as hell took his sweet time slicing up that lady, and you don't do that unless you have a close personal relationship with someone. Probably an ex-boyfriend. That's who I'd look for.
Okay, it's a bit of a push, but Sergeant, you should check it out.
I'm watching you, motherfucker.
That night, Dexter stalks and subdues Jamie Jaworski with M99, a powerful horse tranquilizer that he commonly uses to disarm his victims. Dexter then prepares Jamie's body before using a butcher knife to chop his head off. Dexter then gets a call from Rita, who wants to reconcile after their awkward moment. On his drive home, he passes by a refrigerated truck, immediately suspicious due to the conversation he had with Deb earlier. He follows it onto the freeway where the truck driver turns around and drives directly towards Dexter before doing this. Dexter gives his statement to the police before Maria clears up Dexter's motive for wanting to follow the ice truck. Dexter tries to get Maria on Deb's side, but Maria credits all of this to Dexter's thinking, I guess, and less about Deb's theory. The next morning, Dexter arrives at Rita's really early in the morning to apologize for not making their date, and Rita is like beside herself in this scene. It's honestly really comical. I mean, it's understandable. Rita tries to throw herself onto Dexter to try and satisfy what she thinks he wants before getting a call from her son, which kind of ends that transgression right then and there. You could definitely tell that Dexter was not feeling it, so crisis averted. At the end of the episode, Dexter returns home to find a doll's head taped to his freezer door.
I suppose I should be upset, even feel violated. No. In fact, I think this is a friendly message, kind of like, Hey, wanna play?
Dexter interprets this pure invasion of his privacy as a greeting card from another fellow traveler. The episode then ends with Dexter saying,
And yes, I wanna play. I really, really do.
This episode is a perfect pilot and introduction to the character of Dexter Morgan. Each section of the episode explains a different aspect of Dexter's character and motivations. The first scene shows us the raw, unfiltered reality of what Dexter's needs entail, what his true nature is, the ritual, what he gets down to in his spare time. We then get an inside look into Dexter's personal life, the mask he puts on to hide who he truly is from the rest of the world. His co-workers, girlfriend, and sister each have their own unique reasons for being in his life. He keeps Deb close because the closer they are, the better he can hide who he truly is from her. His co-workers and day job are there to hide who he is to the public. No one would suspect a man in law enforcement to be a threat to public safety, especially a lab geek. His girlfriend Rita is in his life in part to make it look like he can have a relationship with someone and have there be actual emotions involved. Even if he actually does enjoy spending time with her, their relationship is clearly not what most people would consider normal, as the duo rarely bring up sex. Dexter uses each of these people to mask his true colors from the world. The flashbacks throughout the episode serve to give us hints into Dexter's psychology and MO, without fully revealing why he gets these urges. In later ones, a now teenage Dexter has yet to drop the habit, so Harry, who's likely had to harbor this secret for years, decides to come up with a set of rules to make sure his son never gets caught. Each section and element of this episode is there not only to develop Dexter, but also to get us as an audience to sympathize and understand a cold-blooded killer, something that is really difficult to do well. The second episode begins with Dexter floating in a river.
I dream I'm floating on the surface of my own life. Look at them. They can laugh and play. It comes so easily for them, even though I'm not one of them. Even though sometimes I can really be a monster. Today, I'm just a sea monster.
Later on, Deb drops by to complain about being saddled with more vice work in the midst of the ice truck discovery, something that she originally thought of. Maria just will not let this woman level up, unfortunately. Dexter then responds with,
Look, just because LaGuerta has you looking for hookers on her time doesn't mean you can't look for the truck on
my time.
Dexter then plays with his doll. He stares at the doll's hand, which has a different color painted on each of the fingernails. Very curious. I wonder what that means. Later on, he makes an appearance in court before heading off for another hearing where a man named Matt Chambers is being tried for the murder of Alexander Price. At the next crime scene, Dexter discovers a piece of human skin inside of the victim's mouth, signaling to everybody that the victim didn't just fall off of this overpass. He was probably murdered somewhere else and then dumped there under the overpass to make it look like a suicide. Later on, Dexter invites Deb over with her new boyfriend, Sean, to have dinner with him and Rita.
Why don't you and Sean the mechanic join me and Rita the girlfriend for dinner tomorrow night?
Also in this scene, LaGuerta reveals to everybody in the precinct that the man who was found under the overpass was indeed a cop. Later on, Dokes and LaGuerta head to the man's family to inform them that he is dead when they find a poor woman in a pool of her own blood who is Ricky Simmons' wife.
Look.
Ricky Simmons, a husband, that's no doubt.
Dokes takes a personal interest in this crime scene, deciding to bag a phone they found underneath a couch himself, something that Dexter or Masuka could have done. That night, Dexter eats cookies with Rita and the kids and admits to us, the audience, that he didn't think he would ever get to this point with Rita.
Lately, the thing that surprises me most about Rita is how much I like being with her. But whenever that happens with a woman, when I feel comfortable with her, it all goes wrong. That's why I think it's best to take it one step at a time.
The next morning, Deb calls Dexter and proclaims that she found the ice truck that they are looking for.
So Miami's the haystack, and the ice truck's the needle, right?
Okay.
Brother, I just found the fucking needle.
Without a warrant, Deb, Dexter, and Batista open the truck to find a cube of ice with frozen fingertips in the center. They question how this is even possible.
Drain the body entirely before these cuts were made.
How do you do that? Some kind of pump?
No. He hoists the body up, severs the jugular, the heart does all the work. It's the most effective method, really.
Fucking butcher.
Dexter then theorizes that the killer is leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for the police to find. Otherwise, why would the killer leave her fingerprints? The perfect way to ID her. This is extremely fascinating to Dexter, who has spent his entire adult life trying to make sure he doesn't get caught. Coming across a killer who chops his victims up the exact same way he does, a killer who is seemingly trying to get caught to create a show for the police, excites Dexter. There's also the fact that this killer somehow knows who Dexter is, and so this is really enticing to Dexter because Dexter is usually on the opposite side of this equation, stalking his victims. We meet Captain Thomas Matthews, who asks LaGuerta who found the truck, and when LaGuerta reluctantly tells him it was Deborah, she tries to take credit for it before Matthews tells her to congratulate Deb instead, to her dismay.
I'm the lieutenant, which means my officers keep me apprised at all times on all things. You pull a stunt like that again, it won't matter who your father was, okay?
I just love these two and their diva off this season. After returning to the forensics office, Masuka, Deb, Dex, Maria, and Angel melt the ice surrounding the fingertips to reveal the colored fingernails. After the DNA at Ricky's wife's crime scene comes back to match a known cartel member, Dokes leads a team to bring the cartel member in so that he can question him, during which Dokes is extremely emotional, even going as far as to punch the man because he insinuated that he had an affair with the woman. Back at Ricky's house, Dexter discovers a drop of blood that was previously unseen, which matches Norberto's DNA sequence, seemingly confirming that he was the one to kill Ricky and injure his wife. In LaGuerta's office, Dokes complains to Maria about her trying to nail Guerrero, the leader of the cartel that Norberto is a part of, as Dokes remains focused on getting justice for Ricky. After Matt Chambers is found not guilty during his hearing, Dexter confronts him at a bar, and after a conversation between the two, Chambers leaves and Dexter collects his glass so that he can test the fingerprint on it against a criminal database. After returning to the apartment, he does confirm his suspicions that Matt has committed multiple hit and runs all across the country. Dexter finishes setting up a kill room before revealing to us one of his father's rules of the code: to be sure.
My father taught me one thing above all others: to be sure. If God is in the details, and if I believed in God, then he's in this room with me. I just wish he'd brought an extension cord.
This isn't the first rule of the code, but it's arguably one of the most important ones. This rule is set in place to keep Dexter as morally responsible as possible, to channel his urges for good rather than channeling them like Matt Chambers. On their double date, Deb and her boyfriend Sean are passionately making out in front of Dexter and Rita, who are more than a little bit uncomfortable. Dexter and Rita also kind of envy this sort of relationship.
Seems like a nice guy.
They could barely keep their hands off each other.
I can kill a man, dismember his body, and be home in time for Letterman. But knowing what to say when my girlfriend's feeling insecure, I'm totally lost.
That night, Dexter snuggles up to Rita, who tries to initiate a sexual relationship with him. Then Dexter makes her a little bit uncomfortable, so they just stop right there. Dexter then tells Rita that she doesn't need to throw herself at him because he doesn't expect anything from her, because he himself is also not ready for a sexual relationship. Later on, while in a holding cell, Norberto is stabbed by a random cop for what he did. This not only prevents Norberto from serving time, but also from Miami Metro to close in on Guerrero. The next day, Dexter explains to Deb that Sherry Taylor, the fingerless victim, had her fingers chopped off post-mortem. Deb is then called into LaGuerta's office, and Captain Matthews finally promotes her to homicide. However, Maria remains cautious about this promotion because she doesn't believe in Deb. Interesting, because she's not even on homicide and she's basically done all your work for you. And at the end of the night, Maria reveals to Dokes that Kara died in the hospital. Dokes then confesses to sleeping with Kara, and Maria threatens to have James taken off the case because he's too close. In another flashback, Harry reveals to Dexter that his partner was recently killed, and the suspected killer ended up walking free. We see Harry try and justify what will become known as his code. Around this time, the series actually doesn't show us that much of Harry's moral dilemma. This is like one of the only flashbacks that you truly see Harry is confident in Dexter and the code that he's created for him. At the end of the episode, Dexter subdues Matt Chambers before showing him the video from his court hearing. After Matt Chambers confesses to killing the man in the hit and run, Dexter just shuts down any justification he has because he tries to use like 5 different excuses that Dexter's basically all heard before. After returning home, Dexter notices the doll head has been retaped to his freezer door, and the rest of the doll's body is now missing.
The worst thing about finally putting together a puzzle is finding there are missing pieces.
At the start of episode 3, everyone attends Ricky Simmons' funeral, and Dexter tells us that he has a hard time faking grief. Duh, you have a hard time faking basically everything. After the funeral, Dexter stalks Jeremy Downs, a teen who was recently released from jail.
I search for the ones who think they beat the system. They're not hard to find. Like Jeremy Downs. Jeremy got off easy. 4 years in a juvenile facility for manslaughter. To the coroner, the knife strokes looked random, impulsive. But I saw the work of a young virtuoso. Too many major arteries were severed. Femoral, brachial, carotid.
The next day, Dexter plants a lemon tree in Rita's front yard as Rita serves Dexter some lemonade. When Cody says that their trees keep dying, Rita replies with,
I can't help it. I kill things.
It must be awful.
This is highly ironic because the only killer in this scene is not Rita. Then a friend of Rita's ex-husband Paul shows up, demanding her car to pay off the debt that Paul owes him. Dexter does his best to try and make Rita feel safe as the man drives away in her car. Later on, Rita cries in the bathroom and insists that Dexter stay away from the mess. The next morning at work, Dexter has to sit through an uncomfortable sex talk between Angel and Masuka.
You grab her by the hips and you yell another woman's name and bam! You're riding her like a Bronco because she's trying to buck you off.
Many times in life, I feel like I'm missing some essential piece of the human puzzle. This is one of them.
Then Deb stops by to let everybody know that the ice truck killer, as he's now known, has struck again, this time at a hockey rink. After arriving, Dexter and the rest investigate the 5th victim. Batista observes the fact that there is no hesitation cuts on this body. Dexter argues that the killer was never unconfident and he was just getting bored. That's why he made that hesitation cut on the last victim.
I think our boy's got his confidence back.
He never lost it. He was just getting bored. He's escalating the thrill, posing his victim in the middle of a 20,000-seat arena for all Miami to see, to show us what he's capable of doing.
Deb then shows up to reveal to everybody that this body belongs to Sherry Taylor, the one who had her fingers chopped off. She gets really emotional about this because she was like friends with her in Vice. Dokes calls Deb upstairs as Miami has their very first suspect. Deb tries to insist the fact that the prime suspect, Tony Tucci, who was a security guard at the hockey rink, was kidnapped by the real killer to get into the building, to which Maria says,
Your brother help you out with that logic?
The night watchman could have just been at the wrong place at the wrong time. That's why we need to get to his apartment and see what we can find.
Actually, I was hoping I could hit Calle, talk to my old contacts.
I thought you wanted to get out of Vice. Isn't that what you cried to the captain last week?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't cry. Listen, my girls know this victim, okay? They may have information that could help us.
Don't come back without any information.
Later on at the flea market, Dexter stalks Jeremy as he's buying a hunting knife. In another flashback, Harry asks Dexter which gun he would like to bring with him hunting. Dexter decides to use this opportunity to ask Harry if he's ever killed anybody. After Harry confesses the fact that he had in fact killed somebody, he reveals it did not make him feel good. This is what separates Dexter from Harry and most others. Dexter pretends that killing wouldn't feel good in order to share a moment with his vulnerable father. But deep down, Dexter knows that ultimately it's what he wants more than ever. These hunting trips become quite important in shaping Dexter into a calm, controlled killer who doesn't just go after anybody for any reason. Harry brings Dexter along on these hunting trips to teach him to control and channel his urges. Back in the present day, Deb confronts her friends from Vice and reveals that she is a cop. She learns from one of them that Sherry was last seen getting into a station wagon. Later on, Deb searches the DMV database and discovers that Tony Tucci is not on the list of station wagon owners, practically confirming hammering in her mind that he is not the killer. The next day, Dokes presents a videotape found at Tony Tucci's apartment that all but confirms his involvement in this killing. This goes directly against the narrative that Deb was trying to build about Tony being innocent and being kidnapped by the actual killer. After Deb attempts to bring up this whole station wagon theory, Maria just shuts it down because she already has her man in mind. My girl just cannot get a break. She is just not gonna get a break, and it's day one of her being on homicide. I don't know if Maria sees Deb as competition or what, but she is always insulting, discrediting, and dismissing Deb's theories, which, mind you, typically turn out to be correct. Meanwhile, Dexter shows Rita's caseworker around her apartment as Rita is stuck on public transportation. After the tour, as the woman is about to leave, Dexter confesses that his foster experience was actually better than most others. Voiceover Dexter reveals to us that without the code of Harry, he likely would have killed somebody at a young age and ended up just like Jeremy Downs. Then there's another flashback where a 20-year-old Dexter and 17-year-old Deb prepare for Harry's death as he's getting worse and worse. Back in the present day, Deb and Angel survey the videotape and discover...
Right there, see? Right before he repositioned the torso.
He turned his head.
Like someone's giving him directions.
Someone like the ice truck killer holding a motherfucking gun to his back. The killer's framing Tucci.
It looks that way.
While this theory is great and everything, Maria is definitely going to go against it, so Deb goes behind Maria's back and talks to Matthews about this theory, to which she is reprimanded. Dexter then follows Jeremy out into the swamp to prevent him from recreating his first kill. The juxtaposition of Dexter reflecting on what he would have been like as a kid had Harry not fostered him, and Dexter discovering this murderous child, a child Dexter definitely sees a bit of himself in, is really interesting, and it makes him wonder if he should help this kid or just kill him. Back in the past, Dexter is informed by Harry that his nurse is poisoning him.
No, wait.
What is it, honey?
He doesn't want the shot.
Your father's very sick. He's in a lot of pain. He needs a shot.
I want pain. He wants pain.
I'll have to tell the doctor. He's not going to be happy you're refusing your medication.
Harry suspects Mary is drugging other patients as well, so he instructs Dexter to commit his first murder. And I just have to talk about Dexter's wig really quick, because what were they thinking? First of all. Secondly, no, this does not look like a 20-year-old. The flashbacks up till this point have seen Harry err on the side of caution when it comes to Dexter's urges. From his complete denial of them when Dexter was young, to the frustration he faced when Dex was a teen, continuing to act on them by killing small rodents, to the bargaining and sadness he experienced while trying to teach Dexter to hunt instead, and finally now where he's come to not only accept the boy's urges, but also let him use them to try and save him. It's an interesting evolution that the show goes on to explain throughout a number of flashbacks in the first 2 seasons. It took getting poisoned repeatedly to get Harry to let Dexter out of his cage. After Deb gets reprimanded for talking to Matthews about her theory, Matthews goes to Maria and basically forces her to listen to Deb's theories from this point forward. And then Maria goes on the news and reveals to the entire world that Tony Tucci is the ice truck killer. Towards the end of the episode, Dexter confronts Jeremy, who reveals he killed his rapist all those years ago.
I understand now. Why didn't I see it before? Jeremy didn't murder that boy 4 years ago. He was taking out the garbage.
Dexter sees his younger self in Jeremy for a moment before he demands his wallet back.
Look, I really don't want to cancel all my credit cards, and I hate waiting in line at the DMV, so give me back the wallet you stole from my car, or I'll break your fucking neck.
Back in the past, Dexter officially commits his first kill on Nurse Mary, allowing Harry to finally recover. At the end of the episode, Dexter brings Rita a new car that he stole from Impound. Episode 4 opens up with Dexter walking on the beach as he makes his way to Batista, who is standing over a beach chair with a severed hand placed on it. Dexter and Batista wonder if this has anything to do with the ice truck killings, since he typically likes to make quite the spectacle of his victims. Dexter then has a flashback as he realizes he's been to this beach before. He remembers spending a day at the beach with his family when he was a child. After complaining about having to take a family photo, Harry lectures Dexter about not smiling. Back in the present day, Dexter returns to his apartment and looks at old family photos, where he realizes that the only reason the ice truck killer placed the hand where he did is because he saw that family photo from all those years ago. This leaves Dexter to constantly question why this killer is basically setting these crime scenes up for him specifically. He can only imagine what this killer wants, leaving him more and more excited and determined to find out his identity. While Dexter has many goals throughout this season, this is the main thing I would say that he definitely wants to know the most. Elsewhere, Matthews enters Maria's office before revealing that the hand found at the beach belonged to none other than Tony Tucci. This obviously frustrates Maria, as she just got done with the press where she basically dragged Tony Tucci's name through the mud. It also annoys Maria that Deborah, of all people, was correct about Tony being taken by the killer. Matthews then orders Maria to apologize to Tucci's mother for dragging his name through the mud, and you can just tell this poor woman doesn't even care about the apology. She just wants Miami Metro to find her son, dead or alive. Dexter then goes to the Halloween store and reveals to us that it is his favorite holiday because
The one time of year when everyone wears a mask, not just me. People think it's fun to pretend you're a monster. Me, I spend my life pretending I'm not.
the following morning, a severed foot, presumably belonging to Tony Tucci, is found in a public park. Dexter explains to Dokes that the ice truck killer is likely trying to send a message to Miami Metro, a message that is more important than the need to drain his normal victims of their blood. He then has another flashback and realizes what this killer is trying to tell him. In the flashback, Harry lectures Dexter, who is bullying some kids on a soccer field.
What the hell is going on?
You're just having fun.
That didn't look like Simon was having too much fun to me.
He's not corrupting the happy Hallmark images of my youth. He's revealing the ugly truth behind them.
It's clear that the ice truck killer is trying to remind Dexter about the mask that he puts on to society in order to look normal. And he's also trying to remind Dexter how that mask came to be through these family photos. Back at the precinct, Maria forces Deb to look over hours of security cam footage to try and get another lead on the ice truck killer, which is just hilarious because she's the one that's been finding them all of these leads, and now she has to look through hours and hours of videos doing the grunt work, perhaps.
I want you to check every frame.
Oh, you are shitting.
If we're lucky, we can see the ice truck killer coming and going.
The next day, Dexter discovers that there's a possibility Tucci is still alive, as both of the limbs taken from him were taken off of a live body. This causes Maria to call Tucci's mother to assure her that they are going to find him, which, girl, it's a bit early to be making those kinds of assumptions now, isn't it? During a meeting, Dexter breaks the news to everybody that the killer is dumping the body parts at places that were once used for other purposes.
Change.
You got something to say? Speak up.
The beach changed names. The office park used to be a soccer field. He's dumping the body parts in places that used to be something else.
Okay. Places that have changed. Let's make a list.
Back at Dexter's apartment, he looks through old family photos to try and decipher where the next dump will be. While doing this, Deborah calls him from the station as she's reviewing security cam footage. Dexter then figures out where the next dump is going to be, and let's just say it's quite literally a dump. The next morning, Dexter tries to investigate the former dump, which is now condos, before getting a call that the next body was found at a pumpkin patch. Dexter then has a flashback from when he was a teenager at said pumpkin patch. In the flashback, Dexter confesses to Harry that he's having a horrible time despite looking happy, revealing to us that this is around the time that he finally mastered his mask, his facade that he puts on to the rest of the world. After taking the kids trick-or-treating, Rita stops by and seduces Dexter in her Laura Croft Halloween costume. And you guys, Dexter is so silly in this scene.
Trick or treat.
You look great. Who are you?
Laura Croft, Tomb Raider.
You raid tombs dressed like that? That's impressive.
Rita then unknowingly helps Dexter discover where the next dumping ground is going to be at an old hospital that is now abandoned. Meanwhile, Guerrero's associates bring Dokes to Guerrero, who kicks Dokes repeatedly for barking up the cartel's tree. Just then, Mac, who is Kara's brother, shows up to arrest Guerrero and his associates for beating the hell out of Dokes. That night, Dexter arrives and finds Tucci in a rat-infested dungeon beneath the hospital. As the man begs for mercy, Dexter is clearly being tested by the ice truck killer. Just then, assumedly, the ice truck killer takes a photo of Dexter, who is standing right above the body of Tony Tucci, before he makes an escape. Dexter runs upstairs and grabs the photo of him and Tucci, which was interestingly left behind by the ice truck killer. Dexter then calls Deb, who is stuck looking at security cam footage, and allows her to take credit for finding Tucci, which is something that pisses Maria off. Not only was Maria wrong about Tony being the ice truck killer, but Deb was the one to find Tony's body. At the start of episode 5, Dexter and the others investigate the Tony Tucci crime scene, looking for evidence of the ice truck killer. Elsewhere, Rita learns that her coworker Yelena's boyfriend has yet to arrive in America, despite immigrating recently. Rita and Dexter talk about this situation before Rita tries to get some sort of emotion out of Dexter because he seems really closed off as of late.
It always comes to this once sex is introduced. Small talk no longer cuts it. Eventually she'll call me a science project. Slam the door in my face.
It's for this reason that Dexter never shares personal experiences or details about his life, because he doesn't want people getting too close to him because they may find out the truth. This can ultimately lead to his downfall, especially in his relationship with Rita, which has been doing really well as of late. Later on, Dexter heads to a car dealership to investigate who he thinks was supposed to bring Yelena's boyfriend over to America. The owner, named Jorge Castillo, stops Dexter from looking around too much. Jorge then sends Dexter off. That night, Dexter breaks into Jorge's car lot yet again before discovering a building full of dirty mattresses and clothes. The next morning, Dexter brings Rita and Yelena to ID a body that was found floating on the beach. When Dexter offers to go in with them, Rita says that Yelena may need a shoulder to cry on, signaling to him that Rita doesn't believe Dexter can be that for somebody.
No, I'll go with her. She might need a shoulder.
She senses I'm not a shoulder. Bad sign. She's catching on. That must be what love looks like.
After Yelena IDs the body, Dexter is even more motivated to take down Jorge and stop him from trafficking ever again. Deborah and Dokes then question Tony Tucci, who is in the middle of a meeting with a doctor who specializes in prosthetics. Deb then tries out a new method on Tony to get a lead, and that is to try and have him be blindfolded, which is like a big no-no for a trauma victim. Elsewhere, back at the station, Dokes and Deborah question a man named Neil Perry, who is a witness at the Tony Tucci crime scene. After this guy basically spouts a bunch of nonsense, Deborah tries to get more time with him, but Dokes and LaGuardia believe that he's just there to get some sort of attention. Dokes then lectures Deb for trying to think outside the box with her police work, like trying to blindfold a trauma victim.
How do you know Perry doesn't know anything?
Because I've been doing this a lot longer than you.
Okay.
This case is getting colder every minute you waste on bullshit like Perry. And wanting to blindfold a trauma victim, what the fuck were you thinking? Tucci's closed for business now, and you shut him down.
I was trying a new approach.
Maybe you should just learn the basics before you reinvent the damn wheel.
That night, Dexter snoops around Jorge's boat and finds a bunch of bodies hidden beneath it. After Jorge arrives at the boat, Dexter jumps off and hides on the dock. Also, Deb and Dokes talk to Tucci again. When he fails to recall a single detail about the killer, Dokes allows Deb to try the blindfold technique on Tucci. Tucci then suddenly remembers the smell of menthol cough drops that the killer used to suck on while he was dismembering him. While this isn't a huge lead just yet, they do know what to look for at the crime scene: cough drop wrappers. The next morning, they end up discovering a partial print on the wrapper.
We have a partial.
A partial print. A partial fucking print.
Dokes has to congratulate Deb for thinking outside the box.
And let's keep working the old hospital site, people. Never know when we might get lucky again.
It wasn't luck.
That night, Dexter stops by Jorge's lot and sedates him just before his wife stops by and opens the door to the room with all the mattresses, which is filled with Cuban immigrants. This reveals to Dexter that she is in on this entire operation, so he sedates her as well and puts her on his kill table just the same as her husband. He asks them how they make their relationship work in the midst of his relationship issues with Rita.
I'm gonna ask you a question. I want you to answer me honestly. How long have you been married?
12 years.
How do you love each other? You're like me. You make it work. How?
We want the same life.
And we want the same thing.
Same life.
You share the same dream.
The next morning, as Dexter is getting ready to leave the kill site, he is seen by somebody inside of a trunk of a locked car. Before he leaves, he frees all of the Cuban immigrants from the lot before getting on his boat to dump the married couple's bodies in the ocean. Later that night, Dexter has dinner with Rita, and I just want to point out how gorgeous this shot is. The cinematography of Dexter in the first few seasons is absolutely immaculate. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm assuming they shot these first couple seasons on film before transitioning to digital.
Do you have a dream?
Of course. Do you?
Might sound weird. I want to someday be content, just to feel comfortable like everyone else. I want
a normal life. That's all I want.
He's finally able to open up to Rita in a meaningful way, which is exactly what she's been looking for from him. Episode 6 opens with Dexter getting called into his own crime scene. The ice truck killer was somehow able to grab the woman's body from the ocean and return her to the crime scene like she was never in the ocean. Masuka discovers a needle mark on the victim, but Dexter shoots his theory down to protect himself. Meanwhile, Deb, Maria, and Dokes discover Castillo's holding room and end up finding a phone number. Then they find a boy in the trunk of a car, the same boy who saw Dexter kill his last victim the night prior. In a flashback, teenage Deb tries to go with Harry and Dexter on their hunting trip, but Harry will not allow it. Back in the present day, Batista questions a witness who claims to have been held by Jorge Castillo. She reveals to Batista that somebody saved her and the rest of the immigrants before confirming that the wife was in on it, which kind of disproves their theory that Jorge killed the wife. Elsewhere in the station, Masuka reveals to Dexter that Miss Castillo's autopsy suggests that she had trace amounts of M99 in her system. Masuka then reveals to Dexter that he put a request in for all the recipients of M99. Also, Paul calls Rita and threatens to show up at Astor's birthday party because he's just been released from jail. Dexter then has a dream where Harry leads him to his own kill table before Deborah plays the part of Dexter and slices into his cheek. It's no surprise that Dexter is having bad dreams right now. He completely fumbled his last kill. Not only did a child see him commit this murder, but the ice truck killer literally dug the victim out of the ocean and repositioned her in the spot that the murder took place. The next morning, Dexter gets a hold of Masuka's list and removes his name off of it. Deb then goes to Dexter with her copycat killer theory, to which Dexter says,
It's a little textbook, don't you think?
But it totally fits this case.
Or you're trying to make it fit. My advice, keep this to yourself.
Really?
Yeah, Deb, you're new to homicide. This blows up in your face. You've given LaGuerta the excuse she's been looking for to send you back to Vice.
No. I'm onto something here. I feel it. Like one of your hunches. Way to have my back.
Even though this profile matches to an extent what actually happened at the crime scene, Dexter is obviously trying to shoot it down as fast as possible so that it doesn't lead back to him. This will happen multiple times throughout the show, where Deborah will come up with a theory related to a recent killing that will lead the police to Dexter. And because Dexter is the person that she throws ideas off of 100% of the time, Dexter is able to shoot these down whenever it correlates to a murder he committed. As they say, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. And because Dexter knows Deb, he's able to manipulate her into getting rid of her theories that will lead the police straight to his front door. It also creates this wonderful tension between the two because 99% of the time she trusts Dexter's instincts more than anybody. So when he tells her that her theories don't make sense or aren't going to pan out, in her mind it's either a reflection of her competence as a cop or her brother just doesn't understand. Either way, there's a wonderful tension that is created with Dexter doing this. Oh yeah, also Maria tries to get Oscar, the boy that they found in the trunk, to draw the man that he saw rescue everybody. That night, Dexter gets rid of all evidence tying him to all of his murders. He ends up saving the blood slides though because he just can't part with them. This is when he notices Mrs. Castillo's blood slide has been vandalized. This is when Dexter realizes this is just another way that the ice truck killer is toying with him. It's a test.
He's not angry. That's not what this is about. My playmates saw an opportunity to paint me into a corner to see if I'd find my way out, if I'd fight to survive.
That night, Dexter plants as much evidence as humanly possible to tie Jorge to Mrs. Castillo's murder, and what do you know, he gets away with it. The next day, Dexter explains his forensic finding to Deb and Dokes, pointing them in Jorge's direction. Oh yeah, also elsewhere, Rita calls Paul and tells him to stay away from the kids and not go to the birthday party, which, like, okay, diva, stand up for yourself. Back at Jorge's car lot, an officer finds the knife Dexter planted with Jorge's fingerprint on it, basically confirming that Jorge is the killer. Oh yeah, also Oscar ends up drawing Jesus, which basically clears Dexter's name. The 7th episode opens with Dexter at a crime scene outside of what I believe is a bar, after doing whatever the hell this is. Dexter explains that each stroke of the killer's blade struck a major artery, meaning there was intention behind every strike. Meanwhile, Angel arrives at the precinct, and together he and Deb discover that Neil Perry, a previous witness in the Tony Tucci case, had a moving violation the day of one of the ITK crime scenes.
Neil Perry, I know that name. Yeah, he came forward as a witness 2 weeks ago when pieces of Tony Tucci were showing up around town.
Why would a voluntary witness be at 2 separate crime scenes?
I don't know, maybe he was chopping up hookers. Holy motherfuck, is this him?
Perry spies on them through his security cameras before making a beeline for his second car. Back at the station, Maria orders everybody to be as low-key about Neil Perry as possible because the last manhunt that she ordered ended terribly. Back at Perry's, Masuka harasses Deb for like the 15th time.
I got a modified triple cop right home.
Can I have permission to run Masuka's prints as an ice truck killer?
No need for that. I'll give you some warm DNA right now.
Oh God, you're gross. I didn't hear that.
Before another cop looks through Perry's PC to find circumstantial evidence that may tie Perry to the murders. Deborah then finds a hidden closet space with boxes of newspaper articles on the ice truck killer. This is pretty good evidence that Perry is at least fascinated by serial killers, if not a killer himself. They do find photos that they never released to the public in this man's closet, which pretty much confirms in their mind that he had something to do with it. Maria then informs Tom that they are closing in on Perry. This man just cannot let this woman win in the same way that Maria cannot let Deb win. Also, Rita finds out that Paul picked up the kids from school without her permission, and a little bit later on, Paul brings the kids back to Rita, who threatens to call the police on him for breaking the restraining order that she has against him. At the end of the night, Dexter and Rita are randomly rubbing each other's feet when they talk about Paul's dark side. Rita then says that Dexter could never be like Paul, which, like, girl, if you only knew. In the morning, Dexter goes to Jeremy's group home because he suspects that the recent killing outside of the bar from a few nights back had something to do with him, since it was basically the exact MO. He then gets a call from Deb, who forces him to go to Neil Perry's house. Outside, Dexter tries to convince Deborah that Neil is the wrong guy.
Thought you'd want to be here. Something's buried down there. Masuka's been digging all night.
I hate to break this to you, Deb, but you know you've got the wrong guy here, right? The ice truck killer drains the blood from his victims, freezes their bodies, and only then severs their limbs. Neil Perry, on the other hand, stuffs roadkill.
Yeah, and turns it into fucked up fantasy shit.
But the fantasies are all wrong.
Just as he says this, however, a corpse is exhumed from the man's backyard. At the station, Maria interrupts Deb during the Neil Perry briefing to inform everybody that his cell phone records from the night of the ITK killings all came from the same motel. A little bit later on, at the motel, Deb and Angel find a potential victim in Perry's room. They decide to use this woman as bait in order to get Perry. At the park, Dexter almost gets caught vetting Jeremy just as Dokes is arresting him for the murder from the night prior. A little bit later on, Rita confronts Paul for showing up unannounced.
No more surprise visits to the house, no more intimidating my friends, and especially no more Disney dad. You lost your right to be a father when you beat your children's mother. If you want to get to know Aster and Cody, you're going to have to work for that privilege.
Whoa, babe, can I get a word in here, please?
No. Divorce papers. And the ones you refused to sign in prison?
Rita then says she'll agree to give Paul supervised visitation if he signs divorce papers. At the hospital, during Tony's celebration, the prosthetic doctor Rudy flirts with Deborah. After the party, Rudy and Deborah go out for drinks. Back at the precinct, Maria questions Neil. Eventually, after spouting nonsense for hours, Neil finally confesses to the ice truck killings.
I'm tired of asking questions. You're getting off on this too fucking much.
Getting off on what?
The game. I'm guessing that's why you didn't request a lawyer. So you can sit here and say whatever shit comes into your head. Meanwhile, my ass is spitting like cheese whiz, waiting for you to figure out this isn't the fun part. We got you dead to rights. But the good times won't start rolling till you're in a courtroom. Fascination with serial killers is an American pastime, but the feeding frenzy won't start till you throw out the chum. So then I'm just gonna chill.
The fun part was hanging them like cattle, the hookers. Right before I cut their throats, I used gravity boots to hang them upside down to drain the blood. So you gotta understand, I hate blood.
And there it is. All the expectations I had, all the promises of greatness, wiped out.
After this, Dexter goes to Jeremy's room and asks him why he did what he did. Dexter sympathizes with this kid as he sees a little bit of himself in him. Maybe if Jeremy had someone like Harry in his life, he would be a little bit more like Dexter. The next morning, Dexter finds out that Jeremy committed suicide in his cell, and he can't help but feel like justice has been served for those that he killed. Also, Maria finds out that Matthews appeared at a press conference for her and essentially took all the credit for her work.
We need to make an official comment. Don't worry, I'll keep it short. I'm just heading downstairs now for the press conference.
Press conference is over. Don't worry. I kept it short.
You gotta be fucking kidding me. That was my bust.
This is my department.
Did you at least give me credit?
Yes, I just gave it to you.
This is something that Tom and Maria will do to each other quite often throughout the show. They're always trying to one-up each other, and we'll see that happen quite a lot throughout the seasons, so pay attention for that because they have a feud going. And at the end of the episode, Dexter realizes that Neil Perry is not the ice truck killer.
Hi. The fuck are you?
Dexter sees this as a positive, as now he can continue looking for the real ice truck killer, while Miami Metro wastes time on Perry, who has so far made a pretty good case for himself being the actual killer. At the beginning of the 8th episode, Miami Metro Homicide investigates the suicide of a woman named Vanessa Gale. It's revealed that this woman shot herself while taking a bath. In another room, Dokes questions the woman's husband, who claims that Vanessa would not have killed herself. The next morning at the precinct, Dexter investigates 2 former suicide cases and tries to find a pattern between them and Vanessa Gale's. While investigating all 3 of these women, he finds out that all of them share the same therapist, Dr. Emmett Meridian. He quickly looks the man up and schedules an appointment for himself. Days later, Dexter sees Dr. Meridian and creates a bunch of fake issues for him to try and work through in this therapy session. Elsewhere, Maria confronts Neil Perry and tells him that she doesn't believe he's actually the ice truck killer because they were unable to match his prints to the ones found on the cough drop wrapper.
I haven't been able to match your prints against the partial in the lozenge wrapper we found in the abandoned hospital.
Liquid nitrogen. I used it to freeze the body parts. It's extremely effective, but it burns like a bitch.
Or you knew your prints wouldn't match, so you purposely burned your fingertips to hide it.
Are you suggesting that I'm a liar?
Discover my bases, Neil. We both want the same thing. We found your mother's body under your house. Now, you can go down as a pathetic loser who killed Mom, or the most heinous killer in Florida's history.
Perry then demands an interview with a reporter to immortalize his story. Back at work, Dexter posts an ad on Craigslist to try and get the real ice truck killer's attention. Deb sleeps over at Rudy's house and confesses that she's really into him. I can't show you too much in this scene because they are quite literally naked, but she says something along the lines of every time that she's been with somebody, it's been completely meaningless until now. At his second appointment with Dr. Emmett, Dexter discovers a hidden camera in the man's plant before accusing him of being a fake.
So what do you want to talk about? Fakes. People who pass themselves off as something they're not.
Is that how you feel, Sean?
No, I wasn't talking about me.
Who are you talking about?
You.
That's a common first-time reaction to therapy. You think I can't care about you. That I'm only pretending to care because I have another motive.
Bingo.
You got me.
After Neil's interview, he reveals to Maria that he somehow knows how she got promoted to lieutenant. This leads the audience and Maria to question how Perry knew exactly how she was promoted years and years ago when that was never made public information. Meanwhile, back at Emmett's office, Dexter breaks in and attempts to find proof that Emmett had something to do with the death of the 3 women from before. This therapist was practically forcing these women to commit for God knows what reason. That night, Dexter shoots down Rita's sexual propositions because he's in the middle of a case. Poor Rita. She's been through so much this season. Her self-confidence has just been on a roller coaster, I fear. The next morning, Maria asks James if he told anybody about their mission all those years ago, the one that got her promoted.
Did you tell anyone about our bust? The one that got me promoted?
No.
Nobody in the press?
Maria, we talked about this when it happened. It would fuck up your rep and make me look like a whiny bitch.
So then the only way to access that information would be to read the police report, right? We have to have our firewall checked.
This is where Maria realizes that Neil likely hacked into their database to find out details about Maria's promotion and the ice truck killings. During a therapy session, Dexter is told to remember back to a time where he felt completely powerless. He then has a flashback to a little boy crying with blood on his face. This therapy session actually kind of worked on Dexter because he heads straight to Rita's and basically proclaims his love for her. They begin going at it, getting down and dirty. Towards the end of the episode, LaGuerta gets Neil Perry to confess he's not the real ice truck killer when he gets squeamish around a decapitated head that she brings in. The DA and Tom then show up to proclaim to Maria that they are going to go ahead and move forward with a case against Neil. Dexter then attends his final therapy session.
What do you want to focus on today?
I'm glad you asked that. I'm gonna tell you something that I've never told anyone before. I'm a serial killer. Oh, God. Oh, that feels so amazing to say out loud. I'm not joking. I kill people. Whew. There it is again. You should try it. I know. Your big bad wolf is racked up a tidy little death toll. I'm just kidding. I disabled the cameras and I copied the files.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Focus on your breathing. Maybe you'll remember.
Dexter apprehends Emmett and ties him down before killing him for killing all three of those women. And at the end of the episode, Rudy Cooper, Deb's boyfriend, is revealed to be the one responding to Dexter's Craigslist ad. He then goes into his built-in refrigeration unit where he cuts up his latest body. So yes, Rudy Cooper is in fact the ice truck killer. When I tell you that this twist stands toe-to-toe with some of the best twists in television history, I mean it. While I would have liked it if they had waited just a tiny bit longer for this reveal, I am welcoming dramatic irony always. This leaves the audience with more questions, like why is Rudy Cooper doing what he's doing? Why is he trying to get in touch with Dexter? Why did he go after Deborah? Why is he targeting sex workers? Episode 9 opens with Batista and Dokes driving down the freeway. Dokes forces Batista to come to a stop before he chases a man down the road. Once he catches up to him below the overpass, shots are heard by Batista, so he makes his way down as well and sees the civilian dead. Later on, Batista and Maria ask James what happened.
I saw a gun in the suspect's waistband. I went to question him and he took off running when he saw me.
Angel, you saw all this.
Yeah, I saw Bayard halt, and I turned the car around in pursuit.
He took a shot at me. I took cover and returned fire from that corner.
Dexter points out that Dokes' story is inconsistent with the spatter pattern.
No, not from there.
Yeah, from fucking right there.
If you shot him from right there, the blood splatter would go in that direction, but look at the pattern.
You questioning me? Because I got a lot of questions for you.
Whoa. The man's just doing what he's supposed to do.
The man is a fucking creep job.
At the station, Batista confesses to Dexter that he's not sure that Dokes' story adds up either. Also in this scene, Deb begs Dexter for another double date with Rita, this time with her new boyfriend Rudy, who, if you forgot, was revealed in the last episode to be the ice truck killer. Also in this scene, Dexter gets a notice in the mail claiming that his birth father named Joe Driscoll has passed away. Dexter then reveals to us that Joe Driscoll being his father just does not make sense because Harry quote-unquote told him everything about his past. In a flashback, Harry presents Dexter with his new birth certificate. Later on, Rita asks Dexter if he's truly processed his own father's death before insisting she go with him to clear out his things from his house. Dexter then picks up Rita from her house for their road trip. After arriving at Joe's house, Dexter takes it all in. He still questions whether or not it's even possible that Joe Driscoll is his father. Back at the precinct, Batista confronts Dokes about the shooting, with Dokes denying any accusations that Batista throws his way. That night, Rudy and Deb drop by Joe Driscoll's house to help clean the entire place out with Dexter and Rita.
Dexter. Surprise! I know you can't ask for my help, but it's my duty to help while you deal with old wounds. Jesus, whatever, I'm here.
So it appears.
Dexter tries to prevent everybody from sleeping at Joe's house because he doesn't want to share a living space with Deb and her boyfriend, which, like, if you only knew Dexter. The next morning, Rudy offers to join Dexter at the morgue, to which Dexter says,
No. Thank you.
Once there, Dexter has a moment to pay respects to Joe. Dexter surveys the body and realizes the man's tattoo is a prison tattoo. Dexter then asks the doctor how he determined Joe's heart attack, to which the doctor says,
I found microaneurysms in the retinas, common with seizures during a heart attack.
It's also a sign of diabetic retinopathy.
Son, I may be a small-town doctor, but I know a heart attack when I see one.
This tattoo ends up making Dexter remember back to when he was in the car with his father at a very young age. Dexter asks for a moment alone with Joe so that he can further examine the corpse. Also in this scene, Dexter calls Masuka and has him test his DNA against Joe Driscoll's in order to establish a match between the two. In another flashback, Dexter requires surgery for getting sliced up after a fall. It's implied that Harry contacted Joe to donate some blood to Dexter, as Dexter has a very rare blood type. In the present day, everybody looks through Joe's things. They have an impromptu dance party before continuing to clean the house. At the precinct, IA questions Batista about the Dokes situation, and Batista lies to protect Dokes. Later that night, though, Batista does end up going back on his word and throwing Dokes under the bus. The next morning, Masuka calls Dexter and Deb answers the phone to find out that Dexter had Masuka test his DNA. Deb then goes outside to confront Dexter and lecture him about not trusting Harry.
You trusted Dad your entire life, so why question him now?
Am I missing something?
DNA test? Your biological father was dead. Dad told us that. I remember.
So the DNA came back negative?
It was a match. Joe Driscoll was your bio dad. Do you think Dad lied?
I think he might have known Joe was here.
Well, he must have had a damn good reason. And I'm not gonna let some guy you didn't even know draw him into question.
Deb, I'm not questioning anything.
That's why you got a talk screen, too.
Deb is upset that Dexter would even question Harry, as she's put him up on a pedestal her entire life. She cannot confront the fact that Harry would lie to them, hence her saying,
Well, he must have had a damn good reason. And I'm not gonna let some guy you didn't even know draw him into question.
This basically puts a sour taste in everybody's mouth. Not only has Deborah's perception of her father been completely tarnished, but now she feels less connected to Dexter, who is the one responsible for that crack in her father's squeaky clean image. Deb then reveals to Dexter that Joe only had a sedative in his system, which Rita calls into question, as Joe was a recovered addict for 30 years.
It was professional curiosity.
Then you would be professionally glad to know that the only toxin in his system was a sedative, which he probably took to, I don't know, sleep.
I mean, Joe was 30 years sober, and I haven't found anything stronger than Advil in his medicine cabinet.
Wouldn't be the first time an addict fell off the wagon, Rita.
Or someone slipped him a sedative so he wouldn't struggle when he was injected with something. We've seen it before. It's nearly impossible to detect unless you can find the point of injection, which I wasn't looking for, but if I had a chance to examine the body again...
Jesus Christ! He's not even your family.
Deb then lectures Dexter again for being so passionate about his birth father's death.
You gonna start questioning me now?
You? Why would I?
Joe Driscoll was obviously bad fucking news, which is why Dad didn't want you to know anything about him. Doesn't that matter to you?
I don't know what you want from me.
I want what Dad wanted. I want nothing to do with this guy. So let's just finish packing up this crappy house and walk the fuck away!
Later on, Dexter asks his father's neighbor if there were any visitors in the past week, to which the woman says that there was a cable man who showed up about a week ago. Meanwhile, at the precinct, Maria confronts Dokes about his past in Haiti. She suggests that Dokes killed Jacques Bayard because of their past in Haiti together. That night, Dexter tries to investigate Joe's body yet again, but discovers that he has already been cremated. After getting caught by the guard, Dexter takes his father's ashes, and Rudy magically shows up in a car to pick him up. Rudy gets Dexter to accept his tie to Joe before they dump his ashes in front of his favorite bowling alley. After retiring to bed, Dexter finds a thank you note he wrote to his blood donor all those years ago in Joe's house, confirming that Joe was the one to donate blood to him. The next morning, Dexter and Deb reconcile before everybody leaves. The neighbor tries to call out for Rudy, who she reveals is the cable guy that visited Joe. Dexter waves goodbye to the lady, dismissing his only chance to find out the truth about Rudy. Later that night, Paul barges into Rita's, and then this happens.
Where are you going?
Listen, she was only trying to get away from her abuser. Self-defense is always justified. At the end of the episode, Dexter ponders what his life would have been like had he been raised by Joe instead of Harry, also wondering why Harry lied to him about his father being dead. The 10th episode opens with Dexter helping Rita equip her house so that it is Paul-proof. You can tell Dexter just wants to keep Rita safe. For someone who claims to have absolutely no emotions about anybody, he's starting to become very protective of those that he cares about, particularly Rita. At the precinct, Miami Metro receives a mason jar full of blood. This gets Dexter going in all the wrong places since Neil was proven to be innocent.
Marina View Hotel.
Dexter relishes in the idea of another victim or clue to uncover more about his fellow traveler. It excites him. As early as episode 1, Dexter was incredibly in awe of this killer and his MO. What comes next, though, might be too much for him to see. Having seen the bloody scene first, Dokes sends Dexter in because he rarely gets squeamish at crime scenes. However, when Dexter opens the door, he has another memory of that kid sitting in a pool of blood. Dexter then collapses in this pool of blood, ruining the entire scene. He then runs out of the motel for some air. In case you haven't been paying attention, in Dexter's own words, blood, quote, sets his teeth on edge. Up until this point, we've seen him regain focus, establish a functioning mental state, and maintain a stable life, thanks to his fascination with blood. I mean, the man literally collects blood slides from his victims. He studies them, arranging them in order, and without even labeling them, knows which is which.
Alex Timmons, sniper.
Yes, I did it.
Gene Marshall, arsonist.
Have you ever watched someone burn alive?
Cindy Landon, Black Widow.
I'll fuck you if you let me go.
Such fond memories of them all. They all accepted their fate in their own way.
These are more than just souvenirs to him. They calm him down. They relax him. I mean, his job is quite literally blood spatter. His life literally revolves around blood. So why is it that when he walks into a room full of it, this happens?
Hey, you okay? Hey.
I'm just a little queasy. I fell down in there. Never should have skipped breakfast.
Bullshit, you're shaking. What the hell happened up there?
I'm okay. I just need a little air.
Something finally got to you. I guess you're human after all.
Tell us what you saw, Dex. How many dead?
A lot. But no bodies, just blood. Maybe half a dozen dead.
Saying there was a mass murder in there, but they took the bodies?
How's that possible? There's one elevator, emergency stairs with alarms. Someone would have seen corpses coming out.
I don't fucking know. I can't go back in there.
You don't have to.
Fine, just get yourself cleaned up and, I don't know, work from the hallway or something.
In episode 1, it is established that Dexter cannot feel emotion, and therefore crime scene investigation was the perfect avenue for him. So this bloody scene must have had some significance for him to just fall down the way he did. Meanwhile, Rita is confronted by police who are there to gather a statement from her regarding her attack on Paul the night prior. Rita then calls Dexter, who assures her that he knows a lawyer. Normally, Dexter would not bat an eye at this situation, but since he's really come to care about Rita, he grimaces at the fact that he now has to put this on his plate on top of everything that he's just been through. It's a little bit selfish, but it also shows that he cares enough about Rita to do so. Back at the precinct, Deb tries to reach out to Dexter about what he saw in that motel room.
You can talk to me, you know? Just gotta open your mouth and move it. Why do you always do this?
Do what?
You shut me out. Like your birth father that lived up the highway your whole life and never tried to contact you. I still don't know how that makes you feel.
This is a recurring situation in their relationship where Deborah tries to reach out to Dexter, who is always 100% there for Deb, but never fully emotionally willing to share any of his trauma or turmoil. Deb is a self-described emotional wreck. She credits Dexter for keeping her sane multiple times throughout the series, and yet she always notices that Dexter never really relies on her the same way. Obviously, she doesn't know her own brother is a psychopath who does not feel emotion, so this leads her to question his lack of reliance on her many times throughout the series. Later that night, Dexter lies in bed and wonders if maybe Deb is correct about him never caring enough to share his emotions with her. Dexter then has another vision of the boys sitting in a pool of blood. Earlier in the day, Rita argues that she was justified to attack Paul as it was all in self-defense. That night, Deb tries to sleep with Rudy, who is asking a million questions about Dexter's reaction in the hotel room. Deb tries to shut his questions down. It seems like Rudy is more interested in Dexter than Deb. The next morning at the precinct, Dexter shows Maria and company a model he made of all the shoe prints of everybody who stepped foot in the motel room, noting that one set of footprints does not match anyone that they logged. Masuka then walks into the scene to reveal to everybody that there were at least 5 victims worth of blood dumped in the motel room, to which Deb points out the ice truck killer had 5 victims as well. This makes everybody wonder if the ice truck killer saved all of the blood from his victims just to dump in this motel room. That night, Dexter and Rudy have dinner together, and Rudy ends up revealing a crucial piece of his backstory about his mother who died in a car crash, which made him want to get into prosthetics. Okay, dude, whatever. Also, at the club, Batista notices a woman with a prosthetic hand, with the nails painted each a different color. The next morning, Maria tries to convince Tom that the blood found at the Marina View Motel did in fact belong to all of the ice truck killer's victims. Later on, Masuka points Angel in Rudy Cooper's direction when Angel asks Masuka about amputee fetishes.
Said she had a very unique client, Data. An amputee devotee.
You have a lead on this client?
Oh, that's the bitch of it. I don't have a goddamn clue. Except for the freaky sex stuff.
This scene just goes to show how truly horrifying Rudy is and how good he is at hiding who he is from the public. He just had that scalpel in hand and Batista didn't even realize. While Dexter simulates cast-off patterns, Rudy drops by to collect his phone, which he left at Dexter's house the night prior. Deborah sees Rudy leaving and confronts Dexter about them spending time together and bonding, which goes to show that Deb is really kind of jealous of their relationship since Deb never gets any alone time with Dexter and Dexter never opens up to her. She wants Dexter to be able to lean on her the same way that she leans on him.
This is about Rudy. He was just picking up his cell phone.
Where'd he leave it?
My apartment?
What was he doing there?
Eating steaks.
And?
Well, drinking beer.
And?
Deborah?
And?
Talking?
Talking. You talked. You opened your mouth and sounds came out. On the same night that I wanted to talk to you, but you shut me out.
Oh.
Yeah, oh. You spent our entire lives keeping me at a distance. But my boyfriend shows up on your doorstep with a couple of T-bones.
They're porterhouses.
Porterhouses. And you end up tossing beers back into the middle of the night. Dex, you are all the family that I have, and I barely know you.
She claims that she has earned her way to get close to Dexter. During her deposition, Rita confesses the fact that she went on vacation with Dexter and knowingly broke Paul's visitation schedule. It's here where she learns that she's going to have a psych evaluation. I feel so bad for Rita. Like, I just want to hug her and tell her everything's gonna be okay. Later that night, Paul returns with the kids and tries to get Rita to agree to unsupervised visits, noting that he will even drop the charges against her if she does so, to which Rita remarks,
"Fuck you."
In the kitchen, Paul taunts Dexter and tries to play alpha, which causes Dexter to do this. Dexter immediately regrets this move and getting personally involved in Rita's situation with her ex-husband. He ends up dragging Paul's body back into the trunk of his own car before reparking the car so that Rita will not see it. Later that night, Dexter drugs Paul and then calls the cops on him, essentially ridding him from Rita's life. The next morning, Maria appears on the news and reveals that the ice truck killer investigation has been reopened because of the new evidence they found at the motel. This directly goes against Captain Matthews and the DA, who said that they were going to move forward with Neil Perry as their prime suspect. Matthews then storms into her office and lays into her for not coming to him with this information first, before she went on to live television to let the whole world know. Later on, Dexter celebrates with Rita, who has just found out that Paul is in prison yet again. Also, Batista is stabbed in the side by a masked figure while in a parking garage. Before going down, Angel is able to jab the assailant in the face using his head. 2 civilians stop the assault before calling the police. At the end of the night, Rudy shows up at the precinct to tell Deborah that he loves her.
I know what I want.
I was confused because
What I want is very simple and uncomplicated. What did you say?
I love you.
As the two make out, Deb accidentally bites a scab on Rudy's lip, revealing to us that Rudy was the one to attack Angel. At the end of the episode, Dexter returns to the motel room and has yet another vision. This time, he can see a woman calling out to him. As the child, who is confirmed to be baby Dexter, screams in horror, it is presumed that his mother is killed in front of him, finally giving us a hint as to why Dexter has such a fascination with blood. The episode opens with Dexter walking down a dark red corridor. This ends up being the scene scene where Batista was stabbed. Dexter then has more visions of his own mother's death, like at the end of last episode. Deb brings Dex back to reality so that they can focus on investigating the scene where Batista was stabbed. Since stepping into that motel room in the last episode, Dexter has found it extremely difficult to be around blood. It's almost like it's either his life force or his kryptonite. He used to relish investigating cast-off patterns and blood pooling, but now it just makes him extremely woozy. Elsewhere, the woman with the prosthetic hand meets with Rudy yet again, confirming the fact that he's the one that she is seeing. During their date, Rudy draws lines down her back where he plans to cut her up. A little bit later on, Maria informs everybody at the station that Batista did in fact survive the stabbing. Dexter then tries to make a run for it as Angel is safe, so he doesn't need to stay there, but Dokes tracks him down and questions why he's leaving early.
I have someplace I have to be.
Well, we all got someplace to be.
But you just found out that somebody who's supposed to be your friend is gonna live. Does that make you feel anything?
Anything at all.
Take your fucking hand off me.
The next morning, Dexter goes to Camilla and asks her to dig up the file of the crime scene that Harry found Dexter at so he can gather as much information on his mother as possible. And Camilla is acting really weird in this scene.
Yeah, I wish I could help, but everything from that long ago is boxed up in the basement at City Hall. And as you can see, I'm up to my you-know-what and year-end reports. So.
A little bit later on, everyone arrives at a Santa's workshop to investigate the now 6th victim of the ice truck killer. Underneath the tree, Dexter discovers a VHS tape wrapped underneath the dismembered body parts. Everyone watches the tape, which shows the victim reading them a message from the killer. Deb notices the woman's tears are running upwards, which reveals to them that she is hanging upside down. While on their lunch break, Deb claims to Dexter that she invited Rudy over to talk with him because she wants him to figure out what Rudy's angle is, as he's been acting really strange recently. Rudy shows up and Deb leaves for the station, allowing Dexter to investigate. It's here where Dexter notices the cut on Rudy's lip, to which he says,
Oh, workshop accident this morning.
Doesn't look like it happened this morning. Cut's already closing up.
Oh, did I say I meant yesterday morning? I think I'm working too hard. Anyway, I don't think my lip is why Deb arranged this little chit-chat.
Later on, Dexter shows Maria a rogue drop of blood on Angel's shirt, which he plans to test for any possible matches. Elsewhere at the station, Dokes, Deb, and Masuka rewatch the tape and discover that camera tilts up in the last few seconds, revealing the killing took place in a refrigerated room. Later on, Dex reveals to Deb that Rudy wants to be a part of the family. That's why he's been acting so weird lately. And Deb reacts like this.
Wait. Like, propose?
I have to get to the library before it closes, but we'll talk about this later, okay?
Oh my God. Oh my God! Ah!
Dexter does some more research into his past and finds out that his mother died on October 3rd. In this article that Dexter is reading, it's revealed that his mother's name is Laura Moser, and she was chopped up by a cartel member with a chainsaw in front of his very eyes. After finding this information out, Dexter heads to Camilla's house to confront her about lying to him about his past. In the scene, Dexter questions Harry's code. His father's perfect image has started to crumble around him. First, Dexter found out that Harry lied about his birth father dying, and then about him being born a psychopath, when in reality, that's not the full truth. And now Dexter has learned that Harry had evidence and news articles destroyed, going against his very own code to prevent Dexter from knowing the truth. Camilla then reveals to Dexter that he was left in a shipping container for 2 days before anybody found him in a pool of his own mother's blood. A little bit later on at the precinct, Tom heads into Maria's office and officially fires her as lieutenant for her quote-unquote poor handling of the Neil Perry case.
All our mishaps these last few months. Failure to bring in the ice truck killer, mishandling of Tony Tucci, even Neil Perry.
Neil Perry was your fuck-up, not mine.
They're all the result of a bad command structure. So this morning, the commissioner gave me the go-ahead to restructure the division. Effective immediately, you will no longer serve as my lieutenant. I'm sorry, I know this must be difficult for you.
Please, it's ridiculous. You really don't want to do this.
Because of your status in the Cuban community.
I'm a fucking hero to this community.
The replacement has already been selected. Her name is Esme Pascal, transfer from Fort Lauderdale, a real up-and-comer.
Pascal, the Haitian American? You think I'm gonna stay quiet for this? You're out of your mind.
I did warn you, Maria.
Expect a call from my union rep.
You want it, you'll always have a place in the bullpen.
And my fucking lawyer, too!
With all the other detectives.
This isn't fucking over
Back at the hospital, Dexter checks on the wound on the back of Angel's head to reveal teeth marks. Angel says,
"Definitely wounded this guy." Good. I hope I broke his fucking nose. Or at least gave him a fat lip.
This causes Dexter to remember Rudy's fat lip. Dexter then stops by the precinct to make sure that Deb is busy with the case so that Dexter can go off and do what he does best and actually investigate Rudy. Deb then gets a call from Rudy, who begs her to take a break with him later that night. Rudy is on a yacht and seemingly has this romantic night planned for Deb. Elsewhere, Dexter searches through Rudy's trash and notices a cotton swab with blood on it, likely from the fat lip that Angel gave him. Later that night, Deb actually is able to make it onto Rudy's boat, where he surprises her with a proposal.
Hold on, wait.
Well, you're sort of forcing my hand here. I wanted to wait until we were out in the water, but here goes.
Rudy begs her to stay for one glass of champagne, so she complies. As they share a toast, Rudy kisses Deb, but Deb pulls away, noticing his breath has a very familiar smell to it.
Tastes like menthol. As it turns out, it's not that sexy.
She then notices the same cough drop wrapper on the table and puts two and two together. It's here where Rudy starts monologuing before choking Deb out.
That's right, that was the one clue the ice truck killer left behind, right?
Wait, how'd you know that?
I don't often make mistakes, but when I do, they haunt me.
Hilarious.
How did you not know who I was? You're a cop. I think a real cop would at least have a sense that she was the presence of the person that she was hunting.
You're hurting me.
I didn't show you the best part of my loft. I built it myself.
Vince then stops by to inform Dexter that
the autopsy on our Santa's cottage victim, check it out. One arm was shorter than the other. I mean, our guy isn't sloppy. He's precise.
Not now, Vince.
Because our girl was a fucking amputee. I looked up her medical records. That night Batista was stabbed, he was following up on a lead he got from a one-handed call girl. Guess what the lead was about?
The ice truck killer.
Booyah.
The samples you gave me were a match. They're from the same person.
This is where Dexter truly realizes that Rudy is the ice truck killer, so he tries to make his way to Deb upstairs before realizing that she is no longer there. And that, my friends, is where the penultimate episode of Dexter Season 1 fades to black. Dexter returns to his apartment where he tears the entire place apart in search of a clue. Meanwhile, on the boat, Deb wakes up from being choked out, questioning how she didn't see it before.
This isn't you.
Pretty sure it is.
No. No, there's more. I've seen it.
I never wanted to hurt you. Just make it easier for you because I can keep going.
Oh, God, Jesus. Oh, Jesus Christ.
You're not the only one who bought it, okay?
Your name isn't even fucking Rudy Cooper, is it?
Nope.
She is in utter shock at this point because the man who she thought she was going to get married to is the ice truck killer. The next morning, Dokes and LaGuerta ask Angel about the case he was following up on. He reveals to them that he told Rudy he was going to see her, which tips them off that Rudy is the ice truck killer. I love this small detail where Maria says,
I went out last night to meet him. She was supposed to come back and help me canvass, but she never made it.
That's not like her.
It's a subtle reference to how their relationship has changed throughout the season. The beginning of the season saw Maria discredit basically everything Deb had going for her. Yet here, she's saying it's not like Deb to miss work. It shows that she finally recognizes Deb as the cop that she truly is. Dokes and Maria head to Dexter's apartment, which is still in complete chaos. Dexter then pretends not to know about Rudy, to which Dokes says,
well, cut the crap. You know something, damn it. What?
James.
I saw him last night, skulking in the lab, ordering secret blood tests.
What kind of test?
I was looking for a type match on the blood on Batista's collar.
And whose was it?
Rudy's.
Motherfucker.
Knock it off!
He knew all along.
Elsewhere, Paul calls Rita and claims that he thinks Dexter had something to do with his arrest. Rita says he probably just blacked out, but Paul insists that he does not do hard drugs anymore, so why would he be doing heroin? Back in the precinct, Maria gets a warrant to search Rudy Cooper's apartment before briefing everybody that he is now their #1 suspect. This is when the new lieutenant shows up. Meet Esme Pascal. This woman walks in like she owns the place, and now technically she kinda does. She puts Maria in her place and forces her to take a back seat in their pursuit of Rudy. Elsewhere, Dexter arrives at the shipyard where he was reborn and finds the exact shipping container where his mother died. Dexter sees Harry walk out of the container with his younger self on Harry's back. Dexter opens the container to find nothing but bananas. This is when Dokes shows up from out of nowhere and says this gag of a line.
Surprise, motherfucker.
Dokes is definitely on to Dexter more than he possibly ever has been at this point, because why would Dexter be at a random shipping container searching for Deb with absolutely no probable cause to go there? They find Rudy's refrigeration room and confirm the fact that he is indeed the ice truck killer. Dexter then finds a doll which is wearing an apron saying "Home Sweet Home" on it.
Is he taking me back before the blood? To a place where a boy was born? Home sweet home, but which home?
You know, me personally, I never would have put that together, but Dexter is a lot smarter than I am. Meanwhile, Deb is dragged into what looks like a garage or like a storage facility of some kind.
I don't usually work this way. Call it an homage to a fellow traveler I greatly admire.
Back at the hospital, Angel calls the station and orders them to run Rudy's prints against psych databases in order to dig up more dirt on him. Dexter then arrives at his childhood home. Then, in one of the show's biggest reveals, Dexter sees in his vision a younger version of Rudy as his brother, playing with him and his mother in the yard. Only Rudy's name isn't Rudy, it's Brian. Brian enters the yard and confirms that they were brothers. Dexter rushes into the house searching for Deb. He runs into yet another vision of himself and Brian before the older version of Brian uses M99 on him. Back at the precinct, Angel arrives still in his hospital gown and reveals to everybody that Rudy Cooper's real name is Brian Moser. This allows them to run his name through every database and eventually find the address where Deb is being held. Pascal storms in and tries to argue that Brian and Deb are likely still on a boat. Maria claims that going after this boat is a really bad strategy because Brian has likely taken Deb to his final dumping place. Back in the house, Dexter wakes up tied to a chair, where Brian reveals that Harry favored Dexter because he wasn't nearly as traumatized as Brian was.
You were 3. A little bird with a broken wing. First cop on the scene, Harry Morgan. He wanted to make you all better. But me? See it in his eyes. All he saw was a fucked up kid. They all did.
Brian also reveals that he was never adopted by anybody, which is what caused him to grow up in the system. Brian then cuts Dexter free and tries to manipulate him into joining him in a murderous union. He takes Dexter to Deborah in the garage, who is tied down with plastic wrap, just how Dexter usually prepares his victims. Instead of betraying his sister that he's known his entire life, Dexter instead chooses to attack Brian, and by default, saving Deb. The police then arrive and Brian escapes outside. Dexter lies to the police and says that he was only there because Rudy called him. Dokes says he's going to request a suspension for Dexter because he senses a connection between Rudy and Dexter. This does not sit well with Deb at all.
I'm going to request an immediate suspension when we get back to the station.
You know what?
Morgan, you shouldn't be out here.
Are you questioning Dexter?
Morgan.
Back the fuck off my brother! He just saved my life! He's a fucking hero! I want each of you to treat him that way, god damn it!
Jennifer Carpenter was acting here. You guys don't understand. In the ambulance, Deb asks to stay with Dexter before asking,
Why me, Dex? Why you choose me?
Just lucky, I guess.
I was so scared. I was so scared.
I know.
Thank you, thank you. Dad would be so proud.
Dexter lets the hospital keep Deb overnight so that he can stage his apartment and trap Rudy. When Brian enters the apartment and finds out that this is a decoy Deb, Dexter appears out of nowhere and attacks Brian. Elsewhere, Rita gets a call from Paul.
I just want to know that they're safe.
Why are you doing this, Paul?
But you want me to be miserable and alone like you? Is that it?
All I want is for you to look for a shoe.
A shoe.
Could be in the kitchen, could be in the backyard. I checked and it wasn't in the items that they got from the motel room when I was arrested.
And why would it be here?
See, I was trying to figure out why my ankle was so bruised. Now I'm thinking it got banged when Dexter dragged me out. When my shoe was knocked off.
Good night, Paul. Screw you.
Dexter then brings Brian back to his own apartment before tying him down to his own table.
You weren't supposed to wake up.
I guess not.
Dexter then apologizes to Brian for what he's about to do because his feelings about doing it are extremely complicated. He has ultimately just found out that he has a brother who fell down a very similar path as him, just without a code or a guide. As Brian says his piece, without hesitation, Dexter slices Brian's neck before crying over his body, putting an end to the ice truck killer. The next morning, everyone investigates Brian's death, eventually ruling it a suicide. Dexter then has a vision where he is thanked and celebrated by the people of Miami for killing the ice truck killer before he and Deborah make their way into Miami Metro, thus concluding season 1 of Dexter. What a way to end the season on a high note. It will become common for the show to have the best episode of the season as the finale, as the writers are genuinely so good at building tension and saving the best for last. Now, this does not happen with every season of Dexter. I'm looking at you, season 8. But the first season genuinely ends with its best episode. The manhunt for Rudy serves as an extra excitement factor that the episode really needed to kick it into the next gear. And also, if it had just been Dexter looking for Brian, I doubt he would have been able to stop him in time. By the end of the season, Dexter must come to terms with the fact that he's killed the only person who will ever understand him, at least as far as he knows. And yeah, he still has his sister, who he has a great relationship with and cares about on some level, but he's left wondering what his relationship with his brother could have looked like. While season 1 of Dexter is certainly not the best compared to seasons that would come afterward, they absolutely hit this one out of the park. There are definitely some issues I have with the season, like some of the episodes feeling a little unneeded in the beginning, but also I understand that they were just introducing the characters and the plot at that point. With that said, I have finally come to the very end of this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful weekend.